No, this is not quite what we're looking for. Pretty good book, though. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of what we're all about here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. But in short, we take a particular subgenre of horror, and then we explore 3 movies from that subgenre. But today, what we're doing is a bit of a Cliff's Note recap of a subgenre that we've already visited, namely the cults subgenre, horror movies about cults. This is one of my favorite subgenres, actually. There tend to be a lot of really good movies in this subgenre, movies that I like, or movies that would fit into the subgenre. Sometimes they could also fit in other subgenres, and we talked a little bit about that in the previous video, if you didn't see it. The idea of a cult, what constitutes a cult, what makes a movie a cult movie. I don't mean a cult movie like a cult fandom, but a movie about cults, a horror movie about cults. This was what we discussed in the original video. And we also kind of discussed, the very simple point that when you're talking about a horror movie, cults are always bad. They're always bad, and nothing good comes from it in the horror movies. And the movies we talked about in that video reflected that for sure. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick recap of those movies in case you didn't see the video. And if you did see the video, we're going to also talk about a 4th doctorate level selection, as opposed to the undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate selection that we talked about in that video about cult horror movies. Now we're going to talk about the doctorate level selection, so stay tuned for that. But first, let me indoctrinate you into this cult subgenre with a recap of the movies we talked about the first time around. The first movie that we talked about in the cult subgenre video is The Wicker Man. And The Wicker Man is something of a cult horror classic. Horror fans really are familiar with it. They know it really, really well. It's got a really great reputation. But is it really a horror film? Is it really scary? This is what we talked about in the video. Is it a horror movie, or is it a really good mystery movie that has a little bit of horror elements into it? Is it actually scary? And the answer is maybe not, but the ending, that famous ending that I won't spoil here, just like I didn't want to spoil it in the previous video, in case you haven't seen it. It's so well known and so famous for a reason. And it's because it hits really, really well. It is an impactful and horrific ending that, to me, cemented this movie as a horror classic for sure. Even though it does probably operate more as a mystery. It's got this tension and this mystery going throughout the movie, building up to that climactic ending that, even if you haven't seen the movie, you're probably familiar with the ending or have seen it or seen memes of it or something. Pretty famous, and there's a reason for it, and that's what makes this movie fall firmly into the horror camp, in my opinion. But if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. The second movie that we talked about was The Invitation. And The Invitation is one of those movies that I absolutely love. I told the story about how I found it late one night on Netflix, I think it was, and just absolutely was blown away by how great it was. And it holds up. I still feel that way about it. It's just a really well-made movie. It's kind of a slow burn movie. It's really more of a compelling drama about a failed relationship, with these horror elements weaved into it, this kind of unsettled feeling throughout the movie as the dinner party goes on, and then these really disturbing horror elements, that culminate into this, again, kind of a shocking, surprising ending. But this is not as overtly horrific, kind of like The Wicker Man. More like it makes you feel unsettled and uneasy, and then when it goes full horror and it goes shocking, it really hits very well because you're invested in the people, you're invested in the story. Just a masterpiece of filmmaking. Really, Karen Kusama knocks this one out of the park. Everything about it is good. I just really can't praise it enough, and I wish more eyeballs had gotten on it. The last movie that we talked about was The Sacrament. And The Sacrament is directed by Ty West, who everybody's talking about these days after X and Pearl, and deservedly so. The Sacrament is an earlier movie of his, and I absolutely love it. A found footage movie that's based on the Jonestown Massacre. And if you're not familiar with that, we did talk about it in the video, but maybe go look it up because it's pretty shocking, pretty disturbing, a real life event. And this movie being based on that, it gives that an added layer of affectation. Like the movie being based on a real tragedy, it affected me much more because of that. Even though it's still a fictionalized account, it's not like a documentary and it's not like a reenactment of it. It's just inspired by those events, and it's really, really strong violent imagery. It really goes there. It's like a found footage movie, so it starts out a little slow. It starts out with kind of introducing the characters and the setup, but it really, when it goes sideways, it goes hard, and I absolutely love it. It really is just an effective movie on its own. I think it's really well made. I think the actors are giving it their all and doing a really good job of it, especially the cult leader. But the fact that it's tied to that real tragedy just makes it kind of feel like a gut punch. So be aware when when you watch it that that's the a thing that can happen. But it's one I definitely recommend. So those are the three movies that we talked about, and now let's go ahead and jump into our doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the cult subgenre is The Endless. Now, The Endless came out in 2017 and is directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, and we have talked about them a number of times on the channel because they are absolutely fantastic filmmakers, and this might be one of their best movies. I'd have to really sit down and think about it, but this movie is exceptional because it's showing off a wide range of their talents, not just their filmmaking, or I should say, not just the directing, but their entire filmmaking toolbox, if you will. It really is a wonderful two-man job, and it's really showing off their skills. Now, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about two brothers, played by Benson and Moorhead, who have escaped a UFO doomsday cult from when they were children, and now it's 10 years later, and they decide to go back and revisit their cult members who haven't died like they said they were going to die, and it's an uncomfortable feeling when they go back and maybe their memories aren't quite as clear as they thought. And then there's also, of course, something strange going on at the compound where the cult stays, and to say anything more than that would be to spoil it, and of course I don't want to do that. But the movie is absolutely fascinating. It's a really great, mystery drama horror movie that is admittedly lighter on the horror elements, as as Benson and Moorhead movies tend to be. And you won't care, you won't miss it because you're going to be so engrossed in the story and the drama of it all that you're going to be satisfied. Once again, Benson and Moorhead have come up with a fresh take on what might be a tired trope. Cult movies, it's been done before. We've talked about quite a bit of them, but they have a fresh angle on this with the idea of two people who have escaped the cult and then are deciding to return to it, like their life outside of the cult not so great, and their lives are kind of missing something, and there's this draw or allure to going back to the cult, at least for one of them. The other one is a resistant to it, and that's a great and interesting setup that I couldn't recall seeing before. So that's a nice fresh take. And Benson and Moorhead, who did co-direct this movie, they co-edited this movie. One of them wrote it and the other one was a cinematographer, and they're crushing all aspects of this. It's a nice, lean movie that moves really, really well. A story idea that's fresh and original. Characters that feel realistic. It's something I should note. The brothers are being played by Benson and Moorhead, and they feel like brothers. They feel real. They feel like authentic characters, and I bought into them. I bought into that relationship because that relationship's at the core of the movie, and the kind of the friction between the brothers is a essential part of the movie and what is driving the drama of it and what is facilitating the weird shenanigans that are happening. Again, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's a really interesting setup, and it hinges on the performances of these two directors slash actors, and they crush it. They knock it out of the park. They are also working on a very limited budget, and in some points you can kind of tell, it's one location for the most part, etc. But they really stretch that dollar, man. It looks great. The cinematography, this movie's shot really well, and they do a great job of setting the mood by using the camera to illustrate how you should feel, kind of making you feel a little offset or kind of unsettled. They really build the tension. Well, they do this in all their movies, and this is a great example of it. If you're not familiar with their work, this is a great place to start. Except maybe you should see their earlier movie, The Resolution, before you see this one, because this movie operates as sort of I guess like a quasi sequel to The Resolution. There are characters from The Resolution in this movie, and it explores some stuff that would happen after the movie The Resolution. So you don't need to have seen The Resolution to follow this movie. You won't be lost or anything like that, but you're going to get so much more out of that aspect of the movie if you see The Resolution first, which is another movie that I don't think we've talked about it yet, but if we haven't, we definitely will be talking about that in the future. But yeah, that movie is a high recommend as well. But this one, again, you don't need to see that one first, but it helps. But this one, even on its own, stands up really well. It's, I've seen it described as kind of a Lovecraftian type movie, and yeah, I get that. I don't want to spoil the movie too much, but there are some concepts in there that would align really well with what we talked about when we talked about Lovecraft movies. I could have arguably put this movie there, but it really is the central focus, being this cult. And it's, again, a really fresh angle. You see lots of movies about people trying to get, sucked into a cult. You see lots of movies about people trying to get out of a cult. You don't see that many movies about people wanting to go back to their cult. And that was a cool, fresh take, and I really, really liked it. There's also some other elements in this movie that I don't really want to talk about because I don't want to spoil them. But if you watch the channel and you know me and you know my sensibilities and things I like, there's an aspect of this movie that really hits me in the sweet spot. There's it would have enabled me to put it into another subgenre that I won't mention because that's a spoiler. But that really hit my sweet spot for sure. Like everything in this movie was working for me really well. The story plots, the twists, the twists are the mysteries, the resolutions to the mysteries. All of that was really working for me really well. I think it's a fantastic ending. Everything about this movie, like I really don't have any complaints at all about it. I'm sure some other people can nitpick at it, and if you want to do that in the comments below, I'm happy to hear you out and hear what you have to say. But for me, this movie is a damn near masterpiece, and I would highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, because it's just really, really well made top to bottom. Just great filmmakers doing great work on a great story with great actors and cast and crew. Everything comes together super nicely, and it should be an inspiration to anybody who wants to be a filmmaker to see what can be done with a lot of talent and a little bit of money. Love this movie, and definitely am thrilled to be talking about it and sharing with you. So if you haven't seen it, check it out and then come and talk in the comments below because I want to hear what you have to say. So that's our doctorate level selection, but I've also got an extra credit selection for you in case you really love cult movies like I do and are looking for even more recommendations or more suggestions to check out. My extra credit selection is called The Sound of My Voice. The Sound of My Voice came out in 2011 and was an absolute surprise to me. It kind of came out of nowhere. I had been recommended this movie from a friend or something, and it really caught me by surprise. I did not realize just how good this movie was going to be, and it takes a movie as great as The Endless to not have this one be the doctorate level selection because it's absolutely great. It's another one of these movies. It's a low budget, small space, single location, kind of effort of love from the filmmakers, and it absolutely works. If you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a couple, boyfriend and girlfriend, who are also aspiring documentary filmmakers who try to infiltrate this cult led by a woman who claims to be a time traveler. And they're going through all this rigmarole to get accepted into the cult. And maybe some of the cult's indoctrination is starting to work, or maybe it's not, and they're just really going in deep to try to get the story. And we're going to go ahead and leave it at that so as to not spoil anything for you. But this movie is another one where there's a mystery behind it that is absolutely fantastic. And if you're looking for, everything being wrapped up in a nice, tight little bow, neither The Endless nor this movie is going to be for you, frankly, because they're going to be dealing with that ambiguity that I love oh so much. And in this case, that works really well, really to their advantage in telling this story. Now, the movie was directed by and co-written by a man named Zal Batmanglish. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's my best effort. And he, I think he's most notable for a show called The OA, which I've never seen before. And he co-wrote this with a woman named Britt Marling, who is the star. She plays the cult leader in the movie. And she's his frequent co-writing partner. I did a little research on this to find this out. And they have come up with a great story. I absolutely love the story. And for his first feature, he really knocks it out of the park. He is a very confident director, really letting his actors do their thing and just letting the camera linger on them. He's not showy, he's not flashy. He sets a really good mood. Just loving what he's doing behind the camera on there. And like I said, the script is a really fun, fresh idea that I liked quite a bit. It felt fresh and original too. Like this one is maybe not as original as the Endless in terms of premise because you got somebody trying to infiltrate the cult, and then are they getting indoctrinated into it? So maybe it's not the most original concept, but the execution of it, the way the story unfolded, really felt more original. and the twists and turns that it took, that I don't want to spoil, of course, really felt fresh to me. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was something that I hadn't really seen many times before. So I was really enthralled. I was really engaged in this one. And I really like the idea of not giving us clear resolution to the questions the movie raises. The movie raises a lot of existential questions as well as plot driven questions, and it withholds a lot of that for you, lets you kind of fill it in on your own. Now, when I was doing the research on this, apparently this was originally thought to be the start of like a trilogy, and I'm very thankful that it hasn't. Like they haven't made the other two movies, and I kind of hope they never do, because I like the way this ends. I like the ambiguity of it. I like the mysteries that are left unsolved. I like that we don't know exactly where the characters wind up. It all works really well for me. I love that feeling of kind of hanging there and like filling it in with your head. And if they spell it all out with two more movies, first of all, you know, I have an issue with trilogies, so there's that. But if they spell it all out in subsequent movies, it takes away that air of mystery. It takes away that allure for me. And they also have a chance of screwing it up. Right now, to me, it's a perfect ending. And you know, hearing more about it, while I'm intrigued, and I'm if they make the sequels, I will watch them because I would really want to know. I'm also like, it's like, be careful what you wish for. I feel like if they did that, you're gonna be let down. It would be really, really hard to pay that off better than they have in this movie. I really liked also how they put you in the room, quite, you know, like figuratively and literally, like you're in this room with the cultists and you're seeing how the indoctrination works. You're really seeing the psychology of it, and how they break you down and build you up. And it's not the only movie to do this, but I thought it did it really effectively. And using Britt Marling as the cult leader, because she's a pretty woman, she's young, she's charming, and she's not the stereotypical cult leader that you see in movies, you know, the David Koresh, Jim Jones types or whatever. It was a nice twist that worked really, really well and made it a really believable experience. You felt like you were in that room, and you could kind of understand how you might get sucked into it. At least I felt that way, and I thought that was done really, really well. And I just love that they put these things in the movie that are really clever, that paid off, like the handshaking stuff in the movie. You know, that they have a special handshake that they use to get into the cult, and you know, that just wound up being something that worked really, really well. And then, you know, they have that scene where everybody's, you know, vomiting. I'm not really spoiling the movie so much. Other than that there's a vomit in the movie, so you know, trigger warning, I guess. But it really is great to show these physical ways that the cult's trying to break people down and indoctrinate them. It's a powerful scene, man. It just works so well. And I credit again the writing and the director for this, because they really nailed it. But the acting is all good too. Everybody in the movie is really good, and I really love this feeling of not knowing who to trust. Like everybody is kind of suspicious of each other by the end of the movie. Like who is telling the truth? Who's backstabbing who? All of this works out really well. It's, you know, it's a great paranoia film. It's a great ambiguous film. It's a great cult film, and that's why I put it here in the cult films, because it's just something that worked really well for me in terms of depicting what it must be like to actually be in a cult, having never been in one before, knock on wood. Another one that I really think deserves your time. You should check it out if you haven't before. Highly recommend. And if you have seen it, let me know what you think. Are you as effusive as I am about it, or did it not really hit the mark for you? Let's talk about it in the comments. So that's going to do it for our revisiting the cult subgenre. I hope you like these movies as much as I do. And if you do, let's, again, keep talking about it in the comments, because I have plenty more to say about cult movies in general, these movies in particular. So let's keep the conversation going. But for now, let's get into a horror trivia pursuit card, because it's about that time. And I think it's only right to do the psychological category on the card, because, you know, we're talking about cults. There's a psychological aspect to those cult movies. So here's what we got. To what M. Night Shyamalan film was 2016's Split a sequel? This one is a softball for me, and if you follow the channel and you know me, you know that I am the great M. Night Shyamalan apologist. I do love his work, even though some of it's really, really bad, and I am forced to confess that, but I love Split. Split blew my mind, partly because it's just a great movie with great performances in it, and it's Shyamalan back at the top of his game, and partly because of this fact that it was a surprise sequel to an earlier M. Night Shyamalan film that people didn't know about. And I remember being really excited about this. I remember coming out of the theater and calling my buddy up who is not as big of a fan of Shyamalan as me, but he respects him, and I saying, "You got to go see this movie right now." And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "I can't tell you why, but you have to go see it because I didn't want to spoil the surprise, you know, and I didn't want it to be spoiled because it was like opening night that I saw this movie, so I didn't want, you know, the internet or whatever to spoil it for him because it was an amazing feat to keep this a secret in this internet age, to have a surprise sequel to a really big Shyamalan movie. There's a clue for you. So if you don't know, start kind of, you know, start figuring out what your guess is going to be if you don't already have the answer. I, of course, do have the answer. You know, I'm going to say going once, going twice, because I've already prattled on long enough. I'm going to go ahead and give you my answer, and then we'll check the card. So lock in your answer. My answer is, of course, Unbreakable, the Bruce Willis superhero movie directed by M. Night Shyamalan, which is a masterpiece. If you have not seen that movie, it is absolutely a masterpiece, and I can go on and on about it. But let's double check the card and see if I was right. It is Unbreakable. Unbreakable, 2000's Unbreakable. So that one was easy for me. It was like squarely in my wheelhouse. So I'm not going to get too cocky about that one, but I did get it right. So I'm glad. Did you get it right? And if you didn't, what movie did you guess? Did you guess Sixth Sense? Did you guess Lady in the Water? Let me know in the comments below how you did on that, and let me know what you think of cult movies. Let me know if there's other suggestions of the good movies that I haven't talked about before, and I can maybe check them out for my Is It Syllabus Worthy series. But until next week when we do something completely different, class dismissed.